What happens when feedback hits a wall? What happens when, after you've given your feedback, instead of expecting the other person to say something positive and receive the feedback very well, you'd encounter some resistance? What are you going to do? Now, the first thing that we need to understand is to identify the type of barrier, okay, that wall that your feedback actually ran into. And once you've identified that barrier, then you can devise a plan or a strategy to navigate around it and hopefully resolve the barrier in order for the feedback to be properly delivered. Now, there are eight types of barriers that you might have encountered in the past, and you'll be sure to encounter these types of barriers in the future. Now, take note that these barriers, the listing that I'll be sharing, is not necessarily exhaustive. It's possible that there are other barriers that may not be common, okay, but they still would pose some problems for feedback. At the same time, there are barriers that would be a combination of these categories. So it would be good for you to identify the characteristics of the wall that you'd run up against whenever you're going to deliver the feedback. Now, the first type of barrier is denial. Typically, we'd see that person say, "No, I didn't do that. I think you're just imagining things. You have a heck of an imagination." Denial. That's the first type of barrier. Now, the second type of barrier is defensiveness. "I don't do that very much. Don't do that often." Yeah, okay. I might have done that, but that was an exception. I don't usually do that. Okay. And besides, other people do it as well. Defensiveness. That's another barrier for feedback. Now, the third type would be excuses or trying to rationalize or explain things. "Well, I did that because XYZ. This is what you do that makes me do that. Okay. Because you did this X, then I did this Y." Excuses, explanations, rationalizations. Now, the fourth type of barrier is retaliation or retaliating. "Well, you do things that are a problem. Okay. You made things miserable. This is why I did it. Okay. This is what you made me do." Retaliation. The fifth type of barrier is blaming. You raised the issue in the wrong way. It's because you didn't handle it properly. Okay? It's because you did it wrongly. It's your problem. That's why I did it. Blaming. Now, the sixth type of barrier is putting the other down, okay? Diminishing them or putting them one step below you. "I'm disappointed in you. I had hoped you would have done better. I've expected a lot from you, but you fell short. That's why I did this." Okay, putting the other person down. And lastly, questioning motives. Okay, you aren't you raising this issue so that you can do this or you can do that, so you can put me one over, or you can put me at a disadvantage. Okay, that's another barrier. Questioning motives. Now, whatever the type of barrier you'd face yourself in, well, at the root of it, it's because the other party, the intended recipient of the feedback, didn't really hear the message very well. Of course, from a communication standpoint, the one who is doing the communicating pretty much has the accountability to make sure that the message is sent across. Okay. And typically, if the message is muddled or misunderstood, well, maybe the one who gave that particular message, well, probably didn't consider how the recipient is going to receive it. Okay. And that's also true for feedback and not just for communication in general. The feedback giver, okay, the one who gives the feedback, often when faced with a barrier, would simply backpedal. "No, I don't want to do this anymore. Okay. It's a problem. It's a headache. Yeah, probably the person is right. Maybe it's my fault." Okay. Or worse, this person who gave the feedback will no longer be encouraged to give feedback again in the future, which would miss out a lot of opportunities for growth for both the recipient of the feedback and even for the giver of the feedback. Okay. There are some circumstances in which responding to resistance makes sense. You really have to make sure that once you've identified that barrier and you know that feedback is actually important, not just for the person receiving it, but especially for others in general, then it makes sense to actually face the resistance, face the barrier. Okay? What becomes a problem is when the receiver consistently relies on the barriers, on these responses in a way that prevents them from actually taking in the feedback. As the potential recipient, you probably miss out on opportunity if you don't want to listen to feedback. Okay, and well, if you're the giver, if you're the one giving the feedback, well, understand, okay, and perhaps take into heart that the one who's supposed to receive the feedback is actually missing out a lot of opportunities for improvement. Now, rather than giving up or, really forcing the issue, you keep on repeating the feedback, so on and so forth, and you'd be facing the same barrier over and over again. Well, it might be prudent and even necessary to temporarily shift the focus of the feedback and create a situation wherein eventually the thing that you wanted to raise becomes evident in that interaction or that conversation. Okay. Now, the important thing here is that all the principles in relation to trying to relate with the other person still are still in effect. Okay, definitely, you need to be empathetic with the other person. Okay, really try to approach the interaction with a certain level of curiosity or a certain level of understanding. Okay, and always having that genuine interest in the other person's development or growth. Okay, and with that, this would probably not guarantee that the feedback would be delivered, but after some time, okay, the barriers can erode. Okay, and if you really are poised to have an exceptional relationship with the other party, then don't be scared about these barriers when they crop up.